When I disappeared, they acted like it came out of nowhere. But if you look back, really look, you'll see I was already gone a long time ago. Just still breathing. That's the thing people miss. Disappearing doesn't always start with packing a bag and slamming the door. Sometimes it starts with a look not returned, a promise never kept, or the sound of your name not being called when everyone else is getting theirs shouted from the rooftops. I grew up in a two-story colonial out in central Pennsylvania. Blue shutters, a flagpole in the yard, and a dad who mowed the lawn like it was a religion. From the outside, we were one of those families you see on a pharmaceutical commercial. Happy, whole. But inside, it felt like I was watching life happen through a thick sheet of glass, close enough to see, but never invited in. My name's Evan Carter. I'm 42 now, but this story started a long time ago, way before the silence swallowed me whole. I was the firstborn, the quiet one. The kid who colored inside the lines, kept his room clean, and didn't talk back. And somehow, I think that was the problem. I didn't give them anything to fight against, nothing to fix or scream about. So, they just forgot I was there. My brother Nate came along 3 years after me. Loud, blonde, charming in that all-American quarterback kind of way. He had this grin that could get him out of anything. And believe me, it did. My parents, Bill and Sharon, fawned over him like he was a golden retriever with a scholarship. Every scraped knee was a tragedy. Every B+ was a school-wide failure. Meanwhile, I was getting A's and ulcers in the background, quietly dying for a pat on the back that never came. There's this memory that always sticks in my throat like a bone. I was turning 10. Double digits, big deal to a kid. I'd spent weeks dropping hints about this telescope I wanted. I even drew a little picture of it and taped it to the fridge. The day comes and I wake up buzzing with excitement. I come downstairs and nothing. No balloons, no cake, no telescope. Just mom half asleep with a coffee and dad yelling at the news on TV. Later that day, Nate comes home with a black eye from the playground. Suddenly the world stops spinning. Ice cream, hugs, his favorite dinner. My birthday turned into Nate's sympathy parade. That's when I started learning how to disappear without leaving the room. You might think I'm bitter. And yeah, maybe I am. But I didn't start out that way. I tried. I really did. I stayed out of trouble, got a job at 16, paid my way through community college. No loans, no handouts. I even moved back home for a bit to help when Dad lost his job in '08. I brought home groceries, paid half the utilities, kept my head down. Still, Nate was the son they talked about at dinner parties. I was just, Evan's doing fine, he's quiet. Always quiet. Then came 38. That year slammed into me like a freight train. I'd been feeling off for a while, joint pain, fatigue, weird rashes that came and went like bad dreams. Doctors ran tests, passed me around like a hot potato, until finally someone slapped a name on it: Dermatomyositis. Rare. Chronic. The kind of autoimmune disease that sounds made up until it ruins your life. The treatments were brutal: immunosuppressants, for infusions, physical therapy, just to stay functional. My insurance covered a slice of it, but the rest? Out of pocket. Thousands. So I did something I'd never done before. I asked my parents for help. I remember the call like it's still echoing through my bones. Mom answered on the second ring, her voice chirpy like she hadn't forgotten my existence for the last decade. "Hi, honey. Everything okay?" I told her about the diagnosis, the costs, the fear I couldn't quite name. There was a pause on the line, long and tight. "Oh, Evan, we'd help if we could, but you know how tight things are right now." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Yeah, I get it." "We love you, sweetie," she added quickly, like that fixed it. Dad didn't even get on the line. Not once. I went to bed that night with a tight chest and a colder heart. I told myself it was fine. I'd manage. I always had. But 2 months later, I got a text from Nate. A picture of a key in his palm with the caption, "Guess who just got a beach condo? Surprise from the rents." I stared at that message so long my phone timed out. A condo. A fucking condo. They couldn't cover a few grand for my treatment, but they handed him a beachfront property like it was a sandwich. And it wasn't even for a job relocation or something practical. This was a luxury. A place to relax and get away from it all. And here I was, hooked up 2 and 4, wondering if I'd have to sell my car to cover the next month of meds. That's when the crack in my chest stopped being a crack. It became a canyon. And the truth is, it didn't surprise me. Not really. That's the worst part. I didn't cry, didn't scream. I just felt numb. Like my body finally caught up to how invisible I'd always been. It wasn't just about the money. It was about what it meant. It meant they'd never seen me. Not when I was a kid, not when I was sick, and definitely not when I asked for help. You can only bang on a locked door for so long before you realize no one's home. Or worse, that they are, and they're just pretending not to hear. That was the night I stopped knocking. I tried not to let the bitterness turn into poison, really I did, but there's only so much swallowing a man can do before he chokes on his own silence. After that phone call with my mother, I went into survival mode, cut back on everything I could, worked extra hours even though the fatigue felt like wet cement in my veins, and skipped doses when I had to, all so I could just keep treading water. The worst part wasn't even the money. It was that moment, that very specific, bone-deep moment, when you finally realize your life doesn't hold the same value to the people who raised you. Not compared to the other kid. My doctor, this no-nonsense, silver-haired woman named Dr. Ramos, looked me straight in the eye during one appointment and said, "Evan, if we don't stabilize your immune system soon, you're looking at possible organ involvement." She wasn't trying to scare me. She was just laying it out flat. The kind of truth that has weight, the kind that doesn't give a damn whether you're emotionally ready to hear it or not. I nodded, clenched my jaw, and said I'd figure something out. And I did try to figure something out. I called every clinic within 3 counties, looked into trial programs, applied for assistance, and sold what little I could old tech, a guitar I hadn't touched in years, even my grandfather's watch. I didn't touch Nate's money. That wasn't even an option in my head. Not because I didn't need it, but because I already knew what the answer would be if I asked. Then came that moment. The moment that took all the pretending and torched it like a pile of dry leaves soaked in gasoline. I still remember the day because it was just stupidly sunny, like the weather had no business being that cheerful while my world was quietly rotting. I got a group text from Nate, our family thread. He sent a video first, one of those obnoxious Instagram boomerangs of him holding up a key, swinging it back and forth like a drunk magician. The caption read, "Surprise! Thanks Mom and Dad, best gift ever." My stomach turned before the video even loaded. I watched it anyway. He panned the camera around a gorgeous, freshly renovated beach condo. Ocean view, huge windows, light hardwood floors, fancy appliances that probably cost more than my entire treatment plan. There was even a note on the counter written in Mom's all-caps handwriting that said, "Happy birthday, Nate. Welcome to your coastal escape," with a bunch of hearts drawn around it like a damn middle school love letter. What would you do if your parents told you they were too broke to help save your life, but then handed your sibling a beach condo like it was a damn iTunes gift card? Would you stay? Would you forgive? I didn't respond to the text. I didn't say a word. My phone buzzed for hours afterward, Nate thanking them in voice notes, Mom gushing about the tile she picked out, Dad chiming in with a smug, "Figured you deserved a place to unwind, son." Unwind from what, exactly? His mid-20s identity crisis? His exhausting life of softball leagues and startup jobs funded quietly through Dad's connections? I sat there in my one-bedroom apartment, lights off, just listening to the distant hum of traffic outside my window. My meds sat untouched on the counter because I was down to half doses and needed to ration them. I hadn't had a full meal in 3 days, living on instant oatmeal and weak coffee because the treatment ate away at your appetite and your budget in equal measure. And somewhere out there, my little brother was probably drinking sangria barefoot on a balcony overlooking the Atlantic, all expenses paid by the same two people who told me just months before, "We're sorry, Evan. We're strapped right now." Strapped my ass. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of pain, though that was always lurking, but because my brain wouldn't stop spinning the same question over and over like some cruel carousel ride. What did I do so wrong to be worth so little? Was I too quiet? Too easy? Did they think I could just manage anything on my own, so they never needed to show up? Or was it simpler than that? Was I just the spare? I know how dramatic that sounds. I hate even saying it out loud. But when you've spent your whole life playing the good son and still come up short, it's hard not to let those thoughts set up camp in your skull. I called Mom the next morning, just to see what I'd hear in her voice. She picked up on the second ring again, all chipper and sunlit like always. "Hi, honey." "Hey. So, Nate got the condo, huh?" I said it plain, like I wasn't already bleeding inside. "Oh yes," she said, all excited. He was so surprised. "It's something we've been planning for a while. Since before I asked you for help?" I don't know why I said it. Maybe I was hoping she'd fumble, maybe I wanted the truth. But she didn't even pause. "Well, different budgets, sweetie. You know how that goes. It's not about favoritism. Different budgets." Like my disease was a bad investment and his beach view was a solid ROI. I hung up without another word. Not slamming it. Just, click, quiet, done. After that, I didn't speak to them again for weeks. I went to work, I went to my treatments, I sat in silence most nights watching old movies I'd already seen 100 times because they were predictable. Comforting in a way my family had never been. I started writing down every expense, every sacrifice, every moment I'd eaten shit in silence over the years, and it formed this disgusting little mountain I couldn't unsee anymore. It was around then that the idea of disappearing started to flirt with me. Not dramatically. No big blow-up, no screaming match, no slamming doors. Just, one day not being there. A clean exit. A life cut from the fabric of theirs so neatly that maybe they'd wonder if I'd ever been stitched in at all. I didn't want to go to the damn party. I had every excuse lined up. Work, treatments, weather, migraines, hell, even food poisoning, if it came to that. But I went anyway, and to this day, I'm still not sure why. Maybe it was pride. Maybe I wanted to prove to myself I could walk through their world and not break down, or maybe I just wanted to see the thing with my own eyes. To stand in the place that had somehow cost more than my body, my health, my damn life. Either way, I got in the car, turned the key, and drove 4 hours to the coast with a fake smile already locked and loaded. When I arrived, the whole place looked like it had been pulled from a glossy vacation magazine. White walls, seafoam accents, quartz countertops, so clean they looked illegal. The air smelled like new paint and eucalyptus candles, and someone had put out a tray of fruit skewers like we were in a boutique hotel instead of standing in the middle of what was now a physical monument to parental betrayal. Nate greeted me with that wide, effortless grin he always had, the kind that said he hadn't ever really struggled a day in his life, but wanted you to think he could relate anyway. He clapped a hand on my shoulder and said, "Dude, I didn't think you'd come." He wasn't being rude. He genuinely sounded surprised, like I was a ghost showing up at my own funeral. I just laughed and said, "Well, it's not every day your brother gets a beach house," and somehow managed to keep my tone light, even though every word scraped something raw on the inside. The place was packed with their friends, a few cousins I barely remembered, some of Nate's college buddies who were already halfway drunk and talking loudly about waves and surfboards and beach bars they planned to hit after. My parents, of course, were beaming like they'd just been given the keys to the city. Mom was wearing this bright coral dress she always saved for photo ops, and Dad had his arm slung around Nate like he was showing off a brand new car. Not once did either of them come over to ask how I was doing, even though I was standing right there in the corner sipping on a plastic cup of warm sangria and pretending like my knees didn't hurt from the walk up the stairs. I don't think anyone really noticed me. That was kind of the theme, right? I was there in the photos, part of the family technically. But no one asked how the treatments were going or if I needed anything or even how the drive was. It was all Nate this and Nate that, and can you believe how generous Sharon and Bill are? With every passing comment like a slap to the face wrapped in sugar. At one point, I stepped out onto the balcony just to breathe. The ocean was right there, stretching out like it had no idea whose blood paid for the view. While I stood there, I had a flashback so vivid it almost knocked me off balance. I was 16 again, standing in the rain outside my high school auditorium after the debate finals. I'd won first place, even beat a kid who later got into Princeton. My coach shook my hand, told me I was going places. I waited in the parking lot for over an hour, holding that stupid plastic trophy, until the janitor came out and said he had to lock the gates. My parents had forgotten. They'd gone to Nate's baseball game, which he lost, by the way. No one mentioned the debate the next day. No one asked how it went. That night, I shoved the trophy into the back of my closet, behind an old box of Legos and a pile of winter coats. Back in the present, I stepped back inside and caught my own reflection in the condo's massive mirror, drawn face, tight smile, eyes that looked like they were holding back a scream. And for a moment, I felt this bizarre wave of calm. Like I finally understood my role in this whole messed-up family play. I wasn't the villain. I wasn't even the backup. I was the quiet applause after the real show had ended. I left the party without saying goodbye. No dramatic exit, no tears or confrontation. Just walked out, got in my car, and drove away with the same numbness I had carried there. I doubt anyone even noticed. I imagined them raising a glass inside, laughing at one of Nate's dumb jokes, maybe wondering where Evan went, maybe not. The drive home was quiet, no music, just the sound of tires rolling over asphalt and the occasional whisper of wind through the windows. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just sat there, letting the silence settle over me like dust on a forgotten shelf. And I remember thinking, not for the first time, and definitely not the last, how easy it would be to just keep driving. Not to any one place in particular, just away. Away from the birthday parties I wasn't celebrated at, the phone calls that never came, the way they all looked through me like I was wallpaper in the house they built around Nate. When I finally pulled into my driveway, the sky was already dark, and I sat there for a long time staring at the porch light I'd left on. It felt too bright, too hopeful. I didn't want to go inside, but I didn't have anywhere else to be. So I shut off the engine, stepped out, and walked into my house like I wasn't carrying a coffin on my back. Because that's what it felt like, the weight of everything I'd buried over the years. All the birthdays, all the skipped dinners, all the favors never returned. And in that moment, I felt something inside me click into place, not rage, not sadness, but something colder. I wasn't going to beg anymore. I wasn't going to explain myself, or try to be seen, or wait for their guilt to catch up. I would be exactly what they had made me, an afterthought, a ghost, a name they said in past tense at Christmas. And for the first time in years, that idea didn't make me feel broken. It made me feel free. The thing about Nate is that he never had to ask for anything twice, and usually not even once, because the world just sort of tilted in his direction by default. I don't think he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth, not exactly, but somewhere between Little League trophies and charm school smiles, he figured out that all he had to do was show up and someone else would take care of the hard parts. That someone, more often than not, was our parents. And me? I was always just a few feet behind him, cleaning up the mess or carrying the weight of silence. He wasn't evil. That's important to say out loud. Nate wasn't some cartoon villain twirling a mustache while kicking puppies. In fact, that's probably what made it worse. He was just a normal guy. The kind of normal guy who got invited to every barbecue, made friends wherever he went, and never had to say sorry for long because people just didn't expect him to carry blame for anything that went wrong. It was like he had a built-in permission slip for life. Screw up, smile, move on. Meanwhile, I had to account for every minor mistake like I was defending a tax audit. When we were kids, Nate got caught cheating on a 6th grade history quiz. He cried, said he was stressed, and my mom marched into the school to demand they not put it on his record. "He's just a little boy," she said, hand on his shoulder like she was shielding him from a firing squad. That same year, I forgot to bring home a permission slip for a field trip. I got grounded for a week and lost TV privileges. That was the pattern. Nate's mistakes were missteps. Mine were character flaws. As we got older, the stakes just got higher. When Nate was 21, he got a DUI after sideswiping a parked car on the way home from some party in the next county over. I remember the phone ringing at 2 in the morning, the sharpness in Dad's voice as he grabbed the keys and said, "Don't wait up." The charges got reduced somehow: connections, good lawyers, a judge who probably owed someone a favor. By the next weekend, Nate was back out on the golf course with Dad like nothing had happened. I overheard him joking about it at Thanksgiving, calling it his little scare straight moment, as if it was just part of growing up. My parents laughed, passed the mashed potatoes, and never once brought it up again. Me? I missed a rent payment once when I was 28 after a roommate skipped town with half the utilities and all the deposit. I told Dad about it over the phone, just trying to vent, and all he said was, "You need to learn some damn responsibility, Evan. You're too old to be playing victim." That was the phrase he always used when I asked for anything playing victim. As if needing help was a performance, like I was auditioning for their sympathy and always falling short. The more I think about it, the more I realize Nate wasn't the disease. He was just the symptom. The real rot was in the soil we were raised in the quiet rules of our family that were never written down but lived in everything they did. Nate was allowed to fall apart because they always assumed someone else would pick up the pieces. I was expected to never fall at all. There was this one winter when I came down with a bad case of pneumonia. I was living alone at the time, still working full-time, barely making ends meet, and completely flattened by this infection that felt like it was trying to hollow out my lungs with an ice pick. I finally caved and called Mom, asked if she could help me out, maybe come stay for a day or two, or even just bring over some groceries. She hesitated. Said she had a church group thing and that Nate's girlfriend had just broken up with him, so she wanted to be there for him emotionally. I coughed so hard during that call I dropped the phone. She never followed up. That same month, I saw pictures of her and Nate at a ski lodge up north. Smiles, Coco, a fire pit at sunset. Apparently, emotional support comes with scenic views and catered dinners. The thing about Nate is he didn't rub it in. Not on purpose. He wasn't cruel like that. But his entire existence was a reminder that effort and reward weren't connected in our house. He failed upward, floated through setbacks, and always landed on something soft. He assumed I was fine because I always acted like I was. And truthfully, I played that part well, because admitting otherwise would have just reinforced their narrative that I was the weaker one. There's this quiet violence in watching someone be handed everything you needed while being told to be grateful for what little you've got. It's a slow erosion, the kind you don't notice until one day you look in the mirror and realize you've been hollowed out by years of small cuts. And you still can't explain it to anyone without sounding bitter or jealous or broken. But it's not about jealousy. It's about justice. About fairness. About wondering what it would have felt like to be chosen, even once. I don't know if Nate ever knew how much I resented him. I don't think he did. He wasn't observant that way. He thought I was strong, self-sufficient, maybe even proud. And I guess I wanted him to think that too. Because the alternative was admitting how badly I wanted to be loved in the way he was loudly, obviously, without condition. And so I kept showing up. To holidays, to birthdays, to family dinners where I sat at the table feeling like a guest in my own life. I laughed when they laughed, clapped when Nate got another promotion, said congrats when they bought him a new car after his last one died because he forgot to change the oil for a year. I bit my tongue until it bled. And every time, I told myself that maybe next time would be different. That maybe they'd notice. That maybe I'd finally be enough. But that's the thing about hope. It doesn't always come back when you call it. Sometimes it just curls up somewhere inside you and dies real quiet. There's a point where you stop expecting miracles, but still throw a coin into the well just in case some god you never believed in decides to answer. That's what writing the email felt like, not an act of desperation, not even hope really, but one last quiet offer of honesty before I finally shut the door for good. I didn't dress it up with guilt or manipulation or long-winded explanations. I told the truth, the kind that feels heavy to say out loud because you've spent so long trying to act like it doesn't hurt anymore. I sat at my kitchen table for over an hour before even typing the first line, staring at the blank screen with my fingers hovering just above the keys like they were waiting for permission to speak. I wanted to sound calm, measured, like I wasn't bleeding through every syllable. I didn't want them to hear panic or weakness. I wanted them to hear the reality, the raw, simple math of what it cost to stay alive and how fast I was sinking. I wrote it like a letter, not like a cry for help, because I was too tired to cry anymore. I said, "Hey, just wanted to let you know where things stand with the treatment. Insurance has denied the last 2 claims, and I'm on the hook for about $7,000 right now. I've worked out payment plans, but I'm already stretched too thin. If there's any way you could help, even a little, I'd appreciate it. I'm not asking for a bailout. Just support. The kind you give someone you care about." That last sentence sat on the screen for a full minute before I hit send. I wasn't sure if I meant it as a dig or a plea. Maybe both. Maybe neither. I just knew that it was the last time I was going to offer them the chance to meet me halfway. I sent the email at 9:15 on a Tuesday night. I stared at my inbox for hours after that, refreshing it like a lunatic, half expecting something warm and generous to appear, as if all the years of silence and excuses had just been a misunderstanding. I woke up the next morning to one new message, from Sharon Carter. No subject line. 3 sentences. "We love you. We hope you understand. We just can't help right now." That was it. Not even a love, Mom. No mention of the diagnosis, no question about how I was holding up, no offer to talk about it or figure something out together. Just a cold little shrug in digital form, a passive way of saying, "You're on your own," like it was a reasonable thing to say to your own son while he was drowning in medical debt and prescription bills. I read it again, then a third time. I tried to imagine the face she made while typing it. Was she sipping tea on the couch? Was Nate in the room, laughing about something on TV? Did she pause between sentences or write it all in one breath like she was knocking out a grocery list? I'll never know. What I do know is that something inside me shifted the moment I saw those words. Not snapped. Not broke. Just shifted, like a gear locking into place after years of grinding. I opened my phone and stared at her contact photo, some old picture of her holding a glass of wine at Christmas, cheeks flushed, smiling like the world loved her. And maybe it did. Maybe it still does. I tapped the delete button and watched her number disappear from my screen like smoke. No fanfare. No big emotional breakdown. Just gone. After that, I stopped pretending I was part of the family in any meaningful way. I went through the motions when necessary, still got the occasional group text about birthdays or holidays, but I didn't respond. I didn't send a thank you when they forwarded me a digital Christmas card with all of them smiling on the beach, Nate and his latest girlfriend front and center while I was conspicuously absent. I didn't reply to Dad's half-hearted thinking of you text 3 weeks later that came without context, like it was sent out of obligation, not care. I told myself I was done expecting anything from them, but the truth is, the wound didn't close just because I stopped looking at it. It just scabbed over into something hard and ugly. I started having trouble sleeping not because of pain, but because of how loud the silence had become. I'd wake up at 3 in the morning, sit on the edge of my bed staring at the floor, wondering how it was possible to feel so alone in a world that still technically had my name on a group text thread. I think that's when the idea of disappearing stopped being a fantasy and started feeling like a plan. Not because I wanted revenge. Not because I wanted them to hurt. But because I needed to breathe. I needed to live without constantly holding out my heart like a business card, hoping someone would finally take it and say, "We see you." Because they weren't going to. Not now. Probably not ever. And the more I sat with that, the more I realized I wasn't just grieving the absence of their help. I was grieving the illusion of family. The myth I'd carried around for 4 decades that blood meant something, that DNA came with built-in loyalty, that if things ever got truly bad, they'd show up at the door like the parents in the movies. But this wasn't a movie. And they weren't those parents. I deleted a few other contacts that day too, cousins I hadn't seen in years, people who only reached out when they needed something or wanted to gossip about Nate's latest job. I stripped my phone down to the bones, just a few close friends, my doctor, my pharmacy. Everything else was noise. Static. Dead weight. And for the first time in a long time, I looked around my tiny, cluttered apartment and felt something like peace. Not joy. Not relief. But the early, cautious sense that I might finally be allowed to stop performing. The final ask wasn't a cry for help. It was a final truth test. And they failed. Not because they couldn't help, but because they wouldn't. Because they didn't think I was worth saving unless it fit conveniently into their schedule. And now that I knew that without a shadow of doubt, the only thing left to do was leave. Quietly. Completely. Before I forgot who I was underneath all that noise. There's this myth people cling to, especially in families like mine, that disappearing is some dramatic thing, a slammed door, a screaming match, a final monologue delivered in tears before vanishing into the night. But the truth is, disappearing is easy. It doesn't come with a bang or a breakdown. It happens in the quiet. It's in the moment you stop returning calls, the second you stop waiting to be seen, the instant you decide that silence doesn't scare you anymore. That was me. No tantrum, no declarations. Just a long, slow fade like a light left on in an empty room. I started with the logistics. If you've lived most of your life under the radar, like I had, disappearing isn't hard. I canceled my lease a month before it was up, told the landlord I was moving for work, no questions asked. I sold my furniture to a neighbor's nephew who didn't even ask my name, just showed up with a truck and a wad of crumpled 20s. I gave away the rest books, old clothes, a cracked coffee maker that still worked if you smacked it just right. What I couldn't sell or give, I left on the curb. My bank account wasn't much, but it was enough for a one-way plan with no timeline. I cashed it out in chunks over several weeks so no red flags popped up. I bought an old, beat-up RV from a guy 2 counties over who'd slapped a for sale sign on the window and parked it in a Walmart lot like he was hoping someone would take it off his hands before it rusted into the pavement. It had duct tape on the passenger seat, a water tank that needed patching, and a smell like old cigars and wet carpet. It was perfect. I registered it under a fake name, Eli Barrett, a combination of 2 street signs I passed on the way to the DMV. No one asked for much ID. A utility bill and some expired mail from a mailbox I'd rented for exactly this purpose. Turns out, if you don't owe anyone money and don't have a criminal record, the system doesn't care who you are, especially if you're polite and keep your head down. The guy at the desk smiled, stamped the paperwork, and handed me keys like I was just another lost soul trying to start over. My phone, the last tether to a life I no longer wanted, I left on a Greyhound bus headed east. I boarded, smiled at the driver, took a seat in the back, then got off 3 stops later and left it sitting on the tray table with the screen still lit up. By the time anyone realized it was gone, I was already halfway across the county line in the opposite direction. I didn't leave a note. Not because I didn't have things to say, but because I'd already said them 100 different ways and none of them had mattered. A letter would just be another unread chapter in a book they never wanted to finish. Besides, disappearing wasn't about revenge. I wasn't trying to make them hurt or wonder or feel guilty, not really. It was about letting go of the idea that I owed them anything. That I needed to keep showing up just to be tolerated. I was tired of earning space I should have had by default. Driving west with no destination, just a vague pull toward mountains or maybe the ocean, I started to feel something I hadn't in years: lightness. Not joy, not yet. But space. Like I could finally breathe without checking my own volume. The RV rattled and squealed with every bump, the air conditioning barely worked, and the radio only played 3 stations, 2 of which were preachers screaming about hellfire. But it was mine. And, for the first time, so was my life. I stopped when I wanted, slept when I needed, ate gas station sandwiches that tasted like cardboard but felt like freedom. I watched the sun rise over places I couldn't name and didn't need to. I learned how to fix the water pump with duct tape and YouTube tutorials. I shaved less, talked even less, and let the quiet settle into my bones like something sacred. No one knew where I was. No one asked. No one called. And the silence didn't feel like abandonment anymore, it felt like permission. I thought maybe I'd feel angry still, like it would all come bubbling up once I had space to feel it. But I didn't. I didn't hate them. I didn't wish them pain or bad luck. I just didn't care anymore. I was done being the spare tire they only remembered when something blew out. I was done trying to measure up to a standard that kept moving every time I got close. I was done being the quiet one, the polite one, the one who made space for everyone else and never asked for any in return. Some nights I would sit under the stars with a can of cheap beer and wonder if they noticed yet. If someone had finally asked where I was, or if my name had come up in conversation like a piece of furniture someone just realized was missing. Maybe Mom had texted once, then given up. Maybe Nate had shrugged and assumed I was just doing my thing. Maybe Dad didn't even notice. The truth is, I didn't want to know. That was the whole point of disappearing, stepping out of the game and refusing to keep score. The thing no one tells you about starting over is how incredibly boring and beautiful it is. Most of the time, nothing happens. You don't meet some mysterious stranger who changes your life. You don't have epiphanies on mountaintops. You just wake up each morning with the sun pouring through dusty curtains and think, I made it through another day without them. And that, somehow, is enough. I didn't make a plan for what came next. I didn't need to. The whole point was not having one. Every day was a blank page I didn't have to justify to anyone. I could paint, write, sit in silence, or drive aimlessly until the tank ran low and then park somewhere new. I could be invisible without it meaning I'd failed. Because disappearing isn't always about being lost. Sometimes it's about being found, by yourself, for once, without the weight of being who everyone else decided you should be. And if I'd known how peaceful that could feel, I might have done it years earlier. But I wasn't ready then. I still believed in apologies. In closure. In the idea that if I just said the right thing, they'd finally get it. Now I know better. I didn't vanish to hurt them. I vanished to save myself. And if that makes me selfish in their eyes, then so be it. I'd rather be selfish and free than loyal and forgotten. It took them nearly 3 months to realize I was gone, which sounds impossible unless you've lived your whole life as background noise in your own family. At first, I told myself it would take a week, maybe 2, before someone noticed the silence, before a birthday passed without a text from me, before a family dinner went by without me playing my usual role of quiet observer in the corner seat. But time ticked forward, and nothing came. No frantic phone calls, no worried emails, not even one of those passive-aggressive group texts my mother used to send when she felt ignored, but didn't want to admit it. It was like I'd faded from the calendar just as quietly as I'd faded from their minds over the years. Then one day, while parked in a rest area somewhere in Nevada, watching the wind beat the hell out of a plastic bag caught in a fence, my laptop buzzed. Not my phone, because that was long gone, just the email address I used to pay bills and occasionally check weather reports. There it was, subject line, "Hey man, where have you been?" From Nate. No greeting. No concern. Just that casual, lazy tone he always used when he wanted something but didn't want to sound like he did. The message itself was a weird mix of brotherly charm and passive curiosity. He said Mom was starting to worry that she had tried calling, which of course meant she probably left one voicemail, maybe two, before throwing up her hands and waiting for the universe to sort it out. He mentioned a few things about his life, new girl, new job, something about investing in crypto with a guy he met at a yoga retreat. Then he dropped this line, buried in the middle of the email like a landmine, not trying to guilt trip you or anything, but disappearing without a word kinda sucks for the rest of us, you know? I read that sentence 5 or 6 times, each word heavier than the last, because it confirmed something I already suspected deep down. They still didn't get it. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about drama. It wasn't about them at all. It was about me finally stepping out of a system where I was only ever seen when it was convenient or necessary. And now that I had removed myself completely, now that I was truly unreachable, they were finally interested in noticing the absence. A few days later, I got another ping, this time a message from a mutual friend from college, someone I hadn't spoken to in years, but who apparently still kept in touch with my dad in that distant, socially obligatory way people do when they run into each other every few years at hardware stores or alumni mixers. The message said, "Hey Evan, just checking in. Your dad called me asking if I'd heard from you. Said your phone's off and your email bounced. Everything okay?" I didn't respond. Not because I was angry at that point, the anger had dissolved into something quieter, but because I knew any reply would open a door I didn't want to walk through again. It was the beginning of the cycle, the same one I'd lived for decades. They ignore, I disappear, they panic, I return. They forget. Repeat. I had finally broken the pattern. And I wasn't interested in stitching it back together with polite answers and hollow reassurances. Then came the Facebook post. Sharon's version of an emotional broadcast. I only saw it because an old coworker messaged me and said, "Hey, your mom posted something weird. Are you missing?" I pulled it up using a dummy account, scrolling through pictures of dogs and political memes until I found it. A photo of me from high school graduation, awkward smile, oversized suit, standing between my parents like a third wheel, and the caption, "We haven't heard from Evan in a while. If anyone knows where he is or if he's okay, please let us know. We're praying he's safe. Evan, if you see this, we love you." There were over 100 comments. Some from extended family, some from church people I hadn't seen since I was 16, all saying things like praying for his return, and he'll come home when he's ready, and he probably just needs space. Not one person asked what might have driven me to leave in the first place. Not one person said, "Why would a grown man vanish like that unless something deeply wrong had been happening all along?" They all assumed I was going through a phase. Maybe a breakdown. Maybe a crisis. But none of them considered the possibility that maybe this wasn't a breakdown at all. Maybe it was a breakthrough. The final email came a week later. It was from Nate again, this time longer, more emotional. He said he'd been thinking a lot and that he realized we hadn't been close in years. He talked about childhood memories, about how he missed playing catch in the backyard, how he remembered that time I helped him with his book report in 9th grade, when he couldn't finish it and I just did it for him. He said he felt like maybe things had gotten a little unbalanced over the years, that maybe I had some resentment, and if so, he was sorry if that ever made me feel small. That's the line that stopped me. Sorry if that ever made me feel small. Not sorry that it happened. Not sorry that he got the better end of the deal every time. Just sorry if I felt that way about it. I didn't respond. I stared at the screen for a long time, watched the cursor blink at the end of that email like it was waiting for me to say something profound. But I had nothing left to give. Not even a thank you. Because it was still the same thing. Still about his guilt, not my pain. Still about his discomfort, not my disappearance. And I wasn't interested in being the balm for someone else's conscience. They finally noticed. That much was clear. But they noticed the silence, not the noise that came before it. They noticed the absence, not the 1,000 cuts that led to it. And now that they were scrambling to fix a problem they still didn't understand. Like trying to glue together a vase you never bothered to protect until it shattered. But I wasn't broken. I was just gone. And for the first time in my life, being gone felt better than being ignored.